Welcome to the Cannacurio Podcast, powered by Cannabiz Media. I'm your host, Amanda Guerrero, joined by my lovely co-host, Ed Keating, who is also our Chief Data Officer here at Cannabiz Media. As you guys have already joined us for our first season, and we're well into our second, and on today's show, we'll actually be joined by Cannabiz Media subscribers and environmental activists, Ron Basak-Smith and James Eichner, co-founders of Sana Packaging. But as always, we're going to jump in with Ed and check out what he has for us today from the Data Vault. What's up, Ed?
Excellent. Thanks, Amanda. So the big story is Arizona. Last week, they started accepting recreational licenses, and within 72 hours, they awarded them. People started selling. Big news. So the state released 86 licenses to existing license holders the first day. And then the next day, 3 more licenses, and last night, 1 more. So they're slowly issuing the licenses. I think from what I've read, it's a pretty straightforward process that you pay your money, you get your license, as long as you're in good standing. I think it's like a $25,000 fee or something like that. And, you know, they've been setting this process in the works for a while. We actually spoke to the trade association down there last year, and they had a pretty good process set up, and it seems like they're, hitting things well ahead of schedule. Some experts thought we wouldn't see stores open until March, but as I said, it happened in about 72 hours. So that's the big story. We also added in a bunch of information from North Carolina hemp, a lot of updates and some new processors. On the cannabis side, in Colorado, we were able to add in over 4,500 expiration dates for licenses. So for our clients who are using the database to keep track of licenses in good standing, this should help that out. And then oddly, there were no new California or Oklahoma records last week. So
really,
who can figure that never happened?
Oh wow!
So
point of saturation has been reached, y'all. We predicted this on the show. We did.
Maybe we'll see. So.
Very cool. Very cool. And a question about Arizona. Do you think that they were able to have such a successful turnaround time, within 72 hours because they were basically moving their med program to their adult use program?
Yeah. Well, at the beginning of the year, we looked at programs to see which ones had gone quickly and which ones had gone slowly. And without surprise, if you've already got a regulatory scheme in place and the players in place, the regulators in place, it's sort of a box checking exercise. I mean, obviously they have to do it right, but I think you hit it on the head, Amanda, that it's just a matter of changing some permissions, because in all cases, I think it's the same store. It might even be just at sort of the SKU level, like, is this a med product or is it an adult use product? So I think they did a good job. I mean, to pull it off that quickly is really impressive. Contrast that with New Jersey.
Yeah, no kidding. Contrast that with New Jersey and New York too, with their limiting regulations or squeezing us basically.
Right.
So Ron, James, welcome to the show. How are you today?
We're good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining.
Doing well.
That's great. So Sana Packaging, we're very familiar just from, I myself have actually been pretty familiar with you guys because I saw you at one of the last conferences I went to in 2020. It was at Cultivated Synergy that you guys spoke on a cannabis sustainability panel. I think it was actually Ron that spoke on that panel. So I'm pretty familiar, but for those of us, for our listeners that are tuning in, can you tell us a little bit about the company? What led you to the creation, the concept?
So Ron and I met in business school when we were pursuing our MBAs at CU Boulder, and, became friends the way people become friends in school. We were both skiers, had similar taste in music, and we ended up taking a lot of classes together because we were both there specifically to study sustainability on top of, the regular business curriculum. And one of the things that we bonded over was being passionate cannabis consumers. And during our second year of business school, Ron approached me. We were in a sustainable venturing class together. And as part of that class, everyone had to present ideas for a group project to work on for the course of the semester. And Ron asked me if I wanted to work on something that had to do with cannabis packaging, something we had talked about before as consumers was that along with a lot of the positivity that we saw the legal industry bringing to the world, one of the big negative externalities that we noticed was the amount of packaging waste being created. And that's not to say that there aren't other negative externalities in the industry. There absolutely are. But we saw that a lot was already being done to address things like lighting or irrigation and stuff like that. And so we felt like the cultivation side of the industry was pretty covered. And we just saw that not much was being done to address the packaging waste being created. So at the time, it was really just that. It was an exploratory project to see if we could find some sort of alternate solution to what we were seeing on the market. And then, one thing led to another, and here we are almost 5 years later.
Wow. It started off as a MBA idea concept, right? Has now turned into your livelihood. Ron, I noticed just, creeping on your LinkedIn, you're relatively young, kind of getting into this space here, especially as an entrepreneur. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of like the hurdles or obstacles that you guys have had to overcome moving into the cannabis sector and taking on sustainability as well as creating packaging for the industry?
Yeah. Interesting. I think, James and I have always said, we think one of the advantages to our success so far has been that we didn't approach this business model with any preconceived ideas of, how packaging should work. Obviously, the cannabis industry, I think, having an approach that you can ebb and flow with the changes that come is super important. So I think we've been fortunate in that sense that we were able to kind of come with a blank slate and bring basically what I think is our driving force here is that's just passion to try to solve this problem. And in this new industry, we've been able to work with some great companies that also have that same drive and want to do something better with cannabis and with the industry as a whole. And, obviously in our area of focus, being packaging. But, for the major hurdles for us has honestly been just figuring out, how do you get from point A to point B with, product launches, getting fundraising, all of these kind of big milestones that we've needed to hit in order to get our product to market. And so, I think for us, our number one thing that we've relied upon is, James and I being a really strong team and being able to bring people around us who also can support us and make sure that we're staying true to our cause and, at the end of the day, executing on the business model.
Yeah, it's like they say, teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yeah.
Now, looking into, Sana packaging as a whole, you guys promote a circular economy, AKA for those of you listening, moving away from a linear take, make, dispose model and moving more into a, circular economic model. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of your three guiding principles?
Yeah. So the circular economy as defined by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a foundation that does a lot of work and research on the circular economy and is very big in promoting it in the marketplace. The way they define it is having three overarching guiding principles, one being designing out waste and pollution, two being keeping products and materials in use, and three being regenerating our natural systems. So designing out waste and pollution means looking at every piece of your supply chain, analyzing it, and seeing how you can literally design out waste and pollution from your processes. So that could be, anything from material sourcing all the way to the product's end of life cycle. In terms of keeping products and materials in use, those are the principles of, reduce, reuse, recycle, and reclaim. So making sure that the life cycle of a material continues to be circular. It continues to be recovered in the waste system in a way that minimizes the amount of stuff that goes to landfill. So can it be composted? Can it be recycled? How can we reclaim and reuse that material and extend the life cycle of that material? And then number 3, regenerating our natural systems. That is possibly one of the hardest principles to adhere to, specifically in packaging. And really what regenerating our natural systems comes down to is there a way that we can create products, put them out into the market, recover them in a way that leaves the world and the environment better than it found it? Is there a way that we can do this that helps heal the environment? And so when we look at some of the materials that we use, hemp is a rapidly renewable and regenerative resource. So from an agricultural perspective, there's a lot of regeneration of our natural systems that happens there. And then from the perspective of using materials like reclaimed ocean plastics, the simple act of using those reclaimed materials is helping clean our oceans. So that's how we're beginning to dip our toes into that regeneration piece. But that's definitely, I think, one of the hardest tenets of the circular economy to stay true to.
Yeah. Digging into that a little bit more, since you do use, 100% plant hemp-based plastic and reclaimed ocean plastic, I'm curious from a sourcing standpoint, how do you find the right hemp partners? Because they're, especially out where you are in Colorado, it's a very licensed kind of business. So what is your process for finding people to work with as partners?
That's a great question. I think from the very beginning with our hemp-based products, it's been all about our supply chain and actually being able to manage the inputs basically. And so hemp being the main input, one of the main inputs for a plant-based product, we have to make sure, like you said, that product's available and where can we source it. And so traditionally, we are not a materials manufacturer. We're a packaging brand. And so traditionally in the manufacturing space, the manufacturer is going to go out and source the material. And so we would kind of stay out of that supply chain. They're sourcing commodities that, everyone has access to basically. And so in our case, we basically had to kind of connect the dots, find someone who is compounding hemp-based biocomposites. Then their connection is with the hemp supplier. So then the compounder really works with the supplier of the hemp material, and then the manufacturer just needs to get our pellets to them on time, basically, or the supplier needs to get it to our manufacturer on time. And so managing that it's been interesting. We've had to go through a couple of compounders, and that it basically comes up to them to build relationships with hemp suppliers out there, and testing the material for cleanliness, testing the material for effectiveness in the manufacturing process. And so I think we've seen some major progress in the last 2 years from where we were when we launched in 2018. A lot of our holdup was actually getting the hemp material and having enough of it to create packaging and consistently have it. So I feel we've moved out of those days, but we definitely still, as we scale, it's always something we're concerned about. But we've definitely seen more stability, at least with our suppliers, and getting the specific type of hemp feedstock that we're looking for, that being the herd, so the innard of the stalk. And that's another thing that, just when you're conceptualizing like hemp, a lot of the hemp out there is growing for CBD. That might not be that's different than the hemp that you would grow for industrial applications, textiles, bio-based materials and stuff like that. So
as you look back at that supply chain, are you in the position yet where you're going to, certify that whole process so that the companies that you work with can sort of be at the level that you are at in terms of, how you're trying to run your company?
So the like you're asking the companies that purchase our product from us?
No, the ones that are supplying your inputs. Like, how do you make sure that they're good actors in this chain? Because
Yeah.
as you know, supply chains get longer and harder to maintain, as George Carlin once said, and it can be an issue for companies who receive products that come along that supply chain.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's, our biggest thing as a business internally is basically our relationships with our suppliers and manufacturers at this point. And then from, kind of product quality standpoint, we have internal standards that we set with our manufacturer, testing protocols from the materials. So, basically making sure that the part has the same dimensional characteristics, visual characteristics, look, like the feel of it, all of those things that, we kind of expect that our end customer expects from us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, batch by batch, we kind of have, tests that are done. When there is an issue and something does arise, we can go back and say, hey, what were the parts looking like that came out of this batch, or what was going on there, and then test that and see if there is an issue. But fortunately, we've had pretty consistent parts the last couple of years with our manufacturers. So really excited about that.
Now, you had mentioned that a lot of hemp is grown for CBD, and from what we've seen in the industry as we track licenses, is that a lot of growers came onto the market with dollar signs in their eyes, and sadly, they're still sitting on inventory or plants that they grew maybe in 2018, 2019, 2020, sitting in barns. Does that help you, hinder you, have no impact because it was grown for CBD? I'm just kind of curious what that part of the supply chain has meant in that dynamic.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. One is like, ultimately, if there were more CBD products in the market, there'd be more packaging. So like, from that standpoint, we, the more that's getting to market, good. From the side of like, it does the CBD market and the focus on that distract from the progress that could be made in the material space? I think, yeah, that's definitely something that's happened. I think we're starting to see a transition away from that, where people are understanding that, there's in every industry, when you look outside of the hemp cannabis space, you see very specific, everyone's doing a very specific part in the supply chain. And so now that development's happening within the hemp space, where people are, honing in on where their, efficiencies are, where their expertise lie, and where they can actually bring a product to market. And so, I guess to answer your question, I think, early on it was a distraction away from like getting people to like processors and stuff of the bio-based material, because everyone was processing it for oil versus processing it for materials that we, textiles and biocomposites and stuff. So yeah, I think those days are starting to change, but it definitely was a concern of ours in the last couple of years.
So one of the things that strikes me about your company and learning about it is this role that you can be in, I think, of essentially being evangelists. You're really passionate about this. You focused on an industry. You're trying to make it better. What is that process like? And do you ever see taking it to other industries? Because obviously cannabis isn't the only sort of packaging consumptive industry. So I'm just kind of curious, what that role is like for both of you.
It's a really great question. First, touching on the evangelization part of it, I think what's important to note there, specifically what we're evangelizing about isn't a specific material, whether it's hemp or reclaimed ocean plastic. It's really about an economic model and the way packaging should work in a sustainable long-term system that will help heal the environment. And so there's just so much education that needs to happen around that. So we always just try to lead with education. So whether we're putting together marketing materials or writing a blog post or even writing a press release about a new product, it's always about how can we help change the narrative around sustainability, disposable products, and waste recovery. So we always just try to come at everything from the point of, we don't want to put any information out there unless it's useful. And in terms of tackling other industries, that's definitely something that's on our radar that we would like to do, but there's really 3 specific reasons why we are currently focused on cannabis packaging. And when I say cannabis packaging, I'm including hemp packaging in there as well, just because the product SKUs between hemp and cannabis products are so similar. But really the 3 reasons we're focused on cannabis are: 1, there's an exceptionally high willingness to pay in the cannabis industry for sustainable packaging materials. If you look at industries like food and beverage, you'll find that those industries are typically willing to pay a 10 to 20% premium for a sustainable packaging material. Whereas in cannabis, we've found that willingness to pay to be upwards of 200 to 300%. And that's just based off of the price of our first products when we launched and the fact that they sold really well. And with that in mind, I think there's a few reasons that willingness to pay is so high. I think one is it's an industry that skews progressive and wants to do the right thing. It's also a hyper-competitive industry where people are fighting for shelf space. So packaging is a really great way to stand out, especially when you consider that you can't pick up, touch, or smell the products the way you can an avocado at a grocery store. So that's the willingness to pay. Then there's also the fact that cannabis is just a rapidly growing industry that has a ton of different packaging needs and pain points. So there's room for a company like ours, a sustainable packaging startup that's trying to do something different. There's room for us to exist. Because there's just such a need. At this point in time, there's not enough cannabis packaging companies out there to serve all the needs of the market. So there's plenty of market share to be had and plenty of room for someone like us to carve out a really strong niche. And then the last thing is that because it's a new and emerging industry, we have a really unique opportunity to try and implement the ideas of circular packaging from the ground up, as opposed to approaching another industry and trying to tackle that same issue from the top down. And we do see that happening on a global scale with packaging. But in those other industries, it's these much larger packaging conglomerates that are, for lack of a better term, leading that charge. And there wouldn't necessarily be the opportunity for a company like ours to be the one leading that movement.
That's great. And actually, it leads into the last question that I wanted to dig into, which is, when you look at leadership and when you look at industries and, specifically leaders, you have people who lead departments, people who lead companies, people who may lead regions. But in this case, it seems that you have the ability to really try and lead the industry. So I'm curious, from a competitive standpoint, how that sets you up. Are you really competing, or are you also trying to get the whole packaging industry to sort of go down this route, because it will help heal the planet? It's not just about Santa, it's about sort of all of us and the whole industry. So I'm just trying to get that sort of meta view from you, if that's sort of part of your goal too.
Yeah, I'd say the meta view is a little bit of both. And I can let Ron elaborate on that a little bit, but real quick, we always approach things from, when we see other, obviously there's competitors out there. But when we see other companies that seem to share our values and are trying to accomplish similar things as us, our first thought is always, can we collaborate with these folks? And so we have a network of what we call internally, we call them sister companies, although technically, the definition of a sister company is that you have the same overarching corporate umbrella or overlord, if you will. So we're not all owned by the same people or the same entity, but we refer to them as sister companies because that kind of, that's the type of relationship we've created with them. But it's companies that who are creating products that complement ours. So we have partners that we work with to source glass jars that go along with our reclaimed ocean plastic lids. We have companies that we work with to provide our customers with hemp paperboard outer packaging. And so we do have this network of like-minded companies that we leverage to be able to provide our customers with a wider spread of products. And that's, if we had approached this differently, all of these companies could be competitors of ours, but instead now they're partners of ours.
That's awesome. And I lied. I did have one more question, sort of the data nerdy question. So once again, as I was learning about what you did, one of the metrics that you put out there is, you like this approach because it presents, I'm going to read this, a superior carbon sequestration potential as 1 metric ton of hemp sequesters 1.5 metric tons of carbon. So I'm curious, as you go out to the marketplace and sell what you sell, does that resonate with people? Because what I've seen and learned in the last 5 years is how metric intensive, especially the cultivators are, where, they know how much water they're using, how much fertilizer, et cetera. This seems to fit right in with that. So does that resonate with your clients when you talk to them about why it's superior and they get it because it's metric, or is it new for them?
Yeah, this is another good question here. I think this kind of goes to the larger question of what we're trying to help folks understand is really like when someone reaches out and asks like, hey, we're looking for a product that's sustainable. What does that really mean? And I think, in the industry and in the world, it's sometimes easy to quantify, something as sustainable based upon a metric, right? We can say, something reduces the amount of carbon, but what we really want to move the conversation more towards is what problems are we trying to solve, and looking at the environment as an ecosystem, and not just this kind of one number. And while that one number can be really important, if we get distracted by that number, we kind of lose sight of all the other things that are happening within that process of creating the product. And so, yes, numbers are really important to create the narrative, but also I think we need to, as a company and as everyone, kind of reshape our approach to sustainability. And one of the examples that I always use is kind of this, we take a global approach to local issues, and it doesn't necessarily work in the world of sustainability. And so, on the West Coast, you might be concerned about water, where on the East Coast it might be a bigger concern about landfill and like where are these actually located, because there's denser populations. And so these two things greatly, depending on what your concerns are as a company, as a consumer, as a human on planet Earth, it's going to change what decision or what you're looking for in your packaging. And so what we try to do is take a holistic approach to the conversation, and where we can provide some data, do so, but also have these conversations with folks about really what are the issues we're trying to solve. And then it goes back to your first question, your previous question around the rest of the industry and competition and stuff. And this is where technically anyone can have sustainable packaging, right? It's very easy. You can just say, customer asks, hey, we want it to be X, Y, or Z, and everyone's got some solution. And so I think what it really comes down to is our conversations about what issues are we trying to solve, and how do these solutions actually work towards a better environment.
Yeah, I love the underlying themes of camaraderie, education, accountability, not just within yourself as a business, but also too within the markets that you guys are going into, or in considering the businesses. Now, given all of the incredible things that you guys are doing, how would a team like yours utilize our platform?
So, this is before, I don't know how many of your answers are kind of, with the world of COVID right now, but I guess I'll just dive into where we were before COVID started. And I think, as you mentioned, you saw us at a trade show and we met there.
Yeah.
So that was, for us as a business, we haven't spent a ton of money on advertising. A lot of it's been boots on the ground. And so that's what worked for us. And then last year, I think we had some conferences and stuff scheduled, March, April timeframe, and we couldn't go to those. And so, that really changed our strategy as far as how are we going to get in front of people? How are we going to figure out who's out there? Because up until that point, we had a had a pathway. And so, I think we see cannabis as a way to see who's out there, understand the different players in each new market, especially when we, as a company, James is the only person in our company who's outside of California. The rest of us, outside of Colorado. James is in California. We are all in Colorado.
Lucky us.
And so, kind of understanding, who are the players in the Florida market, New Jersey market, whatever it may be. It's been really helpful there.
Another part of that is for a long time after we launched, our sales strategy was literally just managing inbound inquiries. And part of that was due to demand. And part of that was also due to our team size and the fact that we were, when we launched, a 2-product company, just trying to get off the ground. But we're also at a natural transition now where we have been developing more of an outbound strategy, and we've just found cannabis to be the ideal tool and platform for us to execute on an outbound sales strategy because of what Ron was saying. It's such a comprehensive database, so it really allows us to drill down on specific customer types and segments within our different customer types. And we're really excited to really leverage cannabis for this transition that we're going through as a company, from just a small startup just trying to keep up with sales to, all right, we're a company that's in a growth stage now. And part of being in a growth stage means we're not just talking to whoever comes to us. We're out there looking actively for who is the best customer for us.
Yeah, it's more focused, more targeted prospecting. Yeah, I definitely can empathize with where you guys are at. I myself have been a part of a couple startups here, and there's always that honeymoon phase with your sales and marketing process where the first 2 years, the inbounds are coming. You get to go to every trade show. Everyone knows you, so that's enough to keep your pipeline fed. But I've definitely experienced it where you don't have any more trade shows to go to. How are you going to build your pipeline? How are you going to actually get yourself out there and continue to push the good word of Sana packaging and sustainability within the industry? So I can appreciate and empathize with that. Now for you guys, Ron, James, I'll leave this to both of you. Do you guys have any guidance, suggestions, thoughts, ideas, recommendations for our listeners that are interested in sustainability or want to get in touch with you to incorporate sustainability into their packaging?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the best ways is honestly to have a conversation. I think we've had, myself, James, and Pete and Jill, who work on sales, hundreds and hundreds of conversations with customers about really understanding what their needs are, why they're looking for sustainable packaging, what their budget is, and how can we, for a lot of companies, it's not always like, let's do a full switch over right away. It's let's find one product and see, if that works and if you're getting the value out of it. And then oftentimes we find that once they start using their products, they see the uptake from customers and how they interact with their push for sustainability. And so, yeah, I mean, I think having just a conversation, reach out, just be curious. We know that sustainable packaging isn't for everyone, but we hope that over time, more and more people, see a case to adopt it and move towards it.
Yeah, and the best way to reach us is via email. We're always available. Just reach out to info@sanapackaging.com. Our sales team is incredible and super knowledgeable, and echoing what Ron was saying, we've had and they've had hundreds of these conversations. So even if you just want to explore the idea of sustainable packaging and how it might work for you, reach out. We'll help guide you through it, because that's, we're not just here to provide a product. We're here to help provide a roadmap and a path forward.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Just reach out to Ron and James, the sales team at Sonic Packaging, if you're interested in having this conversation. I know I've really enjoyed this conversation between the four of us. Thank you so much, Ron, James, for joining. We really appreciate you guys coming on the show. We appreciate your business, and we look forward to getting some updates here.
Thanks so much for having us.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Of course. All right, Ed, let's take one more look ahead. Oh gosh, that rhymes. What license data do we have to look forward to from the data
as
vault?
I said at the outset, we're going to keep our focus on Arizona pretty tightly. There's a lot of MSO opportunity there with Harvest, Columbia Care, and Cureleaf. And for us, it's unpacking some of the limited liability companies that are there to just make sure that we understand who's related to whom, I think. So that'll be a big focus. And also the team's doing a lot of work in California and Colorado, just trying to make those records as accurate and timely as possible, adding a lot more people in Colorado. So we should start seeing that over the coming months. So definitely a lot going on from the data team.
That's good to know. Colorado, getting some updates there. All right, cool. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Cannacurio Podcast powered by Cannabis Media. Stay tuned for more updates from the Data Vault.